Welcome to Concrete Block, the podcast where we dive into the latest news and current events from around the world. I'm your host, Walter, and we're glad you're joining us today. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. In our first segment, we're looking at two major stories that are making headlines globally. First up, North Korea's leader Kim Jong Un has left Pyongyang for China, where he'll be attending a military parade in Beijing. This is a significant event, as it marks the first time a North Korean leader has attended a Chinese military parade since 1959. Kim will be joining other world leaders, including China's President Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin, at the Victory Day Parade, which commemorates the 80th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II. Kim's attendance is seen as a sign of strengthening ties between North Korea and China. And it's also notable that he'll be meeting with Putin, who has been sanctioned by many Western countries over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The parade itself will feature China's latest military hardware, including aircraft, tanks, and anti-drone systems. In related news, we're also following a story about the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. According to reports from the Sydney Morning Herald, Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is facing criticism over his government's handling of military aid to Ukraine. The opposition is calling for more support for Ukraine, while the government says it's doing all it can to help. It's a complex and multifaceted issue, with many different perspectives and opinions at play. We'll be exploring this story further in future segments, but for now, let's just say that it's a reminder of the ongoing tensions between Russia and Ukraine and the need for careful diplomacy and strategic thinking from world leaders. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Concrete Block. Welcome back to Concrete Block. We're diving into a fascinating piece of history that sheds light on the delicate balance of power in the United States government. Today, we're exploring President Franklin D. Roosevelt's infamous court-packing plan and how it compares to the use of executive power under more recent administrations. In 1937, FDR proposed a bill that would have allowed him to appoint up to 6 new Supreme Court justices, effectively changing the composition of the court to favor his New Deal policies. This move was met with fierce opposition from Congress, with many seeing it as an overreach of executive power and a threat to the independence of the judiciary. The Senate Judiciary Committee ultimately rejected the proposal, with the majority declaring it a measure which should be so emphatically rejected that its parallel will never again be presented to the free representatives of the free people of America. The plan was dead in the water, and many historians consider it one of Roosevelt's worst political mistakes. Now, some might draw parallels between FDR's court-packing plan and the use of executive power under President Donald Trump. However, there are key differences between the two. While both involve assertions of presidential authority, FDR's proposal was made through the legislative process, whereas Trump has often relied on executive actions to achieve his goals. It's also worth noting that changing the size of the Supreme Court is not without precedent. The Constitution doesn't specify the number of justices, and Congress has adjusted the court's size several times throughout history. However, Roosevelt's motivations were undeniably ideological, aiming to shift the court's balance in favor of his policies. In contrast, many of Trump's assertions of power have been unprecedented, such as using emergency powers to bypass Congress or wielding the Department of Justice as a tool against political opponents. These actions have raised concerns about the limits of executive authority and the potential erosion of checks and balances in the U.S. government. As we reflect on these events, it's essential to consider the complexities of presidential power and the importance of maintaining a balance between the branches of government. By examining the successes and failures of past administrations, we can better understand the intricacies of our democratic system and the need for accountability and transparency. Stay tuned for our final story of the day, right here on Concrete Block. Welcome back to Concrete Block. We're wrapping up today's show with a look at the latest developments in the world of trade policy. You may have heard that a federal appeals court has ruled against President Trump's tariffs, saying he overstepped his authority in imposing them. Now, let's break down what this means. The court's decision is a significant blow to the administration's trade agenda, which has been marked by a series of tariffs imposed on goods from countries like China, Mexico, and Canada. The tariffs were intended to protect American industries and workers, but they've also sparked retaliation from other countries and criticism from some in the business community. The court's ruling is based on the idea that the president doesn't have the authority to unilaterally impose tariffs under the 1977 law that grants emergency powers to the executive branch. The decision suggests that Congress, not the president, has the power to set trade policy. It's worth noting that this isn't the end of the story. The administration is likely to appeal the decision, and it's possible that the Supreme Court could ultimately weigh in on the issue. In the meantime, the ruling could have significant implications for businesses and consumers who have been affected by the tariffs. To give you a better sense of what this means, let's take a look at some numbers. According to reports, revenue from tariffs has totaled $159 billion so far this year, more than double what it was at the same point last year. That's a significant amount of money, and it's likely that some of it will have to be refunded if the tariffs are ultimately struck down. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think about the court's ruling? Do you think the president has the authority to impose tariffs, or should Congress take the lead on trade policy? Let us know in the comments. That's all for today's Concrete Block. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, stay informed.